At the busy intersection of Peachtree and Fifth, the midday Atlanta sun baked the pavement, bouncing off windshields and mirrored buildings. People moved like water, fast, relentless, eyes forward, horns blared, brakes squealed, shoes clacked. The world didn't slow down for anyone, especially not for Walter Price. He sat on the corner, slouched against a chipped traffic light pole, his unshaven face hidden under a dirty Braves cap, a white cane folded across his lap. A battered cardboard sign leaned against his leg. Blind. God bless you. Most people didn't look. A few dropped coins, never bills. He had become part of the scenery, unseen in plain sight. The sounds were Walter's only map now. Footsteps, crossing signals, coughs, conversations, the bus that exhaled every half hour. He'd learned to survive by piecing together the rhythm of the streets. But today, something broke that rhythm. It was the high-pitched scream of a child's voice. Urgent, wild, then tiny footsteps darting into the street. Aiden, 6 years old, laughing seconds earlier. His chubby fingers had slipped from the nanny's grip when his small plastic dinosaur tumbled into the crosswalk. Without thinking, he chased after it. The screech of tires cut the air like a blade. A black sedan rounded the corner too fast. Walter's head snapped up. The chaos was disorienting, but something in his gut, some leftover instinct from a life long before blindness, told him what was happening. There wasn't time to think, only act. He lunged forward off the curb, arms out, blind. His body collided with something small and soft, the boy. Walter wrapped both arms around the child and rolled. Gravel tore through his coat. His shoulder hit pavement hard. The car whizzed past them, a gust of heat and rubber stench trailing behind. Gasps, screams. A phone clattered to the ground. People shouted. The nanny was on her knees, sobbing, clutching Aiden tightly as Walter groaned nearby, clutching his side, pain pulsing through every nerve. Moments later, Rachel Adams stormed through the crowd, heels in hand, her suit jacket flapping behind her, her eyes locked on Aiden. He was safe, shaken, but alive. She fell to her knees, gathering him into her arm. Then her gaze shifted to the man who had saved him. Walter lay on his side, breathing heavily, dirt in his beard, pain in his eyes. Rachel crawled over to him, trembling. A stranger had just risked everything for her son. "Sir," she whispered, pulling out her wallet. Her fingers trembled as she thumbed through bills. Please, let me..." Walter turned his face slightly toward her voice. His lips cracked open. "I didn't do it for money," he whispered, his voice hoarse and steady. The crowd quieted. Someone kept filming. Rachel's eyes welled with tears. She froze. No words came. Walter Price hadn't always been invisible. Once, he stood at the front of a classroom, chalk in hand, quoting Shakespeare to wide-eyed 11th graders who hung on his every word. He was Mr. Price then, sharp-witted, gentle, passionate about literature, and fiercely devoted to his daughter, Emily. His classroom was filled with posters of classic novels, his desk cluttered with essays and coffee mugs, and his evenings belonged to bedtime stories and laughter, with a little girl who thought the world of him. But life, as it often does, turned without warning. The divorce hit like a freight train, ugly, bitter, and fueled by years of quiet resentment. His ex-wife didn't just take the house and half his salary, she took Emily's heart too. She whispered half-truths, spun lies like silk, slowly rewriting Walter's image, until Emily stopped answering his calls. Losing her broke something in him. He let the glaucoma go untreated, too ashamed to ask for help, too numb to care. When the school board noticed the decline in his performance, they let him go. Within a year, his savings dried up, his sight faded, and he found himself sleeping in shelters, then alleys, then sidewalks. He held on to pride for as long as he could, refusing to beg, but hunger is a quiet negotiator. Eventually, he bought a cane, made a sign, and took a corner downtown. He became one of the many, forgotten, ghost-like, but Emily never left his mind. Every day he wondered what kind of woman she'd grown into, if she'd forgiven him, if she even remembered the sound of his voice. Across town, Rachel Adams lived in a sleek penthouse above the city, surrounded by glass walls and silence. Her days were dominated by spreadsheets, depositions, and 10-hour court battles that left little room for anything else. She was a shark in a tailored suit, brilliant, ruthless, and emotionally impenetrable. Her name was etched onto the door of one of the top law firms in Atlanta, and her face occasionally appeared on local news segments about high-profile corporate cases. But behind the accolades and designer heels, Rachel was hollowed out. Her marriage to Brandon had been a strategic mistake, glamorous on the outside, corrosive underneath. When the IRS exposed Brandon's offshore accounts and fraudulent business practices, Rachel divorced him fast and clean, determined not to let his sins stain her reputation. But the damage was already done, and their son Aidan, sweet and sensitive, paid the quiet price. She loved him fiercely, but love didn't translate into time. The nanny knew his bedtime routine better than she did. Rachel avoided messy emotions, her own included. Her father had walked out when she was 9, disappearing into a new family 2 states away. She'd learned early how to armor herself in ambition, how to make pain look like poise. Parenting, for her, felt like a test that she was failing daily. When Walter saved Aidan, Rachel's carefully controlled world stuttered. She couldn't stop thinking about the man on the sidewalk, the way he'd shielded her son with nothing to gain. He didn't even ask for gratitude, no lawsuit, no media grab, no reward, just a whisper, "I didn't do it for money." That night, after Aidan was asleep, Rachel poured herself a glass of wine and replayed the moment on a loop. She had seen hundreds of people walk by that corner without blinking. Why him? Why her child? Questions buzzed in her mind, interrupting even her case prep. She made a few calls, found his name through a hospital intake form, Walter Price. Nothing else. No phone number, no address, no family. But the name clung to her. It stirred something uncomfortable, something she'd long buried. Guilt, maybe, or a buried longing to make things right with someone she couldn't reach. She wasn't sure what she owed this man, if anything, but she knew she wasn't finished with him. Not yet. They were strangers, polar opposites, a blind beggar and a high-powered attorney. But beneath the surface, both carried the same wounds: estranged children, broken families, and the quiet ache of things unsaid. Walter had lost his daughter. Rachel was losing her son. Neither of them knew it yet, but their lives had already begun to entwine. The video hit the internet like wildfire, thousands of shares within hours, headlines spinning words like hero, blind savior, miracle. In the footage, grainy and shaky, Walter's body flings forward into traffic just as the black sedan careens into frame. He grabs the boy, Aidan, and rolls them both onto the curb. A heartbeat before disaster. The sound of the crowd gasping, the nanny's scream, and the boy's frightened cry played on loop across social media. But it was the final moment that captured hearts. Rachel Adams, trembling, kneeling beside Walter, offering him money, and the old man's whisper, low and firm, "I didn't do it for money." Rachel watched the video alone in her office the next morning, her phone buzzing non-stop with messages from colleagues and journalists asking for a comment. She ignored them. She stared at the screen, seeing the whole thing from an angle she hadn't before. The man who saved her son hadn't even looked up. He was blind, completely blind, and he still threw himself into traffic. Something about that undid her. She spent hours the next day making calls, hospitals, shelters, outreach programs. Most were dead ends, but eventually, a nurse at Grady Memorial remembered the name. Walter Price had refused to stay overnight. No ID, no insurance, no emergency contact, just a bandaged arm and a quiet voice. But Rachel wasn't one to give up. On a hunch, she drove back to that same corner where it all happened. And there he was, same posture, same cane, same sign. "God bless you." She pulled over, stepped out of her luxury SUV and crossed the street. "Mr. Price," she said softly. Walter's head lifted slightly. "You again." She smiled gently. "I wanted to thank you." "Again?" "I already heard it the first time." She reached into her purse, pulled out an envelope. "This isn't charity, just a gesture of gratitude." He didn't touch it. "You want to thank me? Go home and be a mother." The words struck her like a slap. She swallowed and nodded. Fair enough. She tucked the envelope away. For a few moments they stood in silence, the city moving around them. Then Rachel said, "Let me at least buy you lunch." "Not charity, just lunch." He hesitated, then gave a small, reluctant shrug. "If it's good coffee." They ended up at a diner 3 blocks away, tucked into a booth. Walter didn't eat much. just a black coffee and toast. His dignity was disarming. He didn't shuffle or slouch. He sat like a man who once knew purpose. He told her about being a teacher, how he loved language, how his classroom had been his second home. He talked about Emily, the way her laugh used to echo down the hallway, the way she would correct his grammar just to make him smile. But when Rachel gently asked why they no longer spoke, he paused, sipped his coffee, and said, "Her mother made sure I was the villain of the story." And after a while, Emily believed it. Rachel said nothing for a while. She looked down at her own coffee, at the steam rising between them. "I haven't seen my father in 20 years, she murmured. "He walked out when I was a kid. I used to wonder if I did something wrong. Eventually I just stopped wondering." Walter nodded. "Sometimes leaving isn't the worst thing a parent can do. Sometimes staying and being absent, that's worse." The honesty between them was unexpected, raw. Rachel felt something shift. "Mr. Price," she said carefully, "I'm a lawyer, a good one. If you'll let me, I want to help." He looked skeptical. "Help? You're eligible for disability, housing, services, maybe more. And if you want to, I can try to locate your daughter, legally, through the courts if necessary." Walter didn't speak. His fingers trembled as he set the coffee cup down. His mouth opened, but no words came. Instead, he pressed both hands to his face. His shoulders shook. Rachel sat still as he cried, openly, fully, for the first time in years. The tears ran down his face and soaked into his beard, and he didn't try to hide them. She didn't reach for his hand. She didn't offer platitudes. She just sat with him, quietly, letting him feel the weight of being seen again. In that moment, the dynamic between them changed. He wasn't just a man who saved her son. He was a father who had been lost to the world, and she, in her own way, was trying not to become one. Rachel hadn't expected the backlash. What began as a quiet effort to help the man who saved her son quickly became office gossip, whispers in hallways, side eyes in meetings. At first, she ignored it, brushed it off as harmless chatter, but it escalated. One morning, over breakfast in the firm's private lounge, she overheard two junior associates chuckling over a meme someone made, a split image of Walter in his worn coat beside Rachel in her court attire, with the caption, "From power suits to panhandlers, Adams's new pro bono project." Her hands trembled around her coffee cup. Later that afternoon, her managing partner, a silver-haired man named Malcolm Gray, summoned her. He didn't mince words. "We admire your heart, Rachel," he said, steepling his fingers. "But aligning yourself publicly with someone like that, it's not a good look for the firm. Clients expect discretion, stability." She wanted to ask him if decency had an income requirement, but she didn't. She just nodded and walked out, rage boiling beneath her skin. Then Brandon resurfaced. Her ex-husband had a nose for opportunity and the ego of a politician. He filed a motion to reopen their custody agreement, citing questionable judgment and exposure of their son to potentially unsafe individuals. His attorney used buzzwords like emotional volatility and media spectacle, weaponizing the viral video against her. Rachel sat in her living room that night, the court document in her lap, numb. She'd clawed her way to the top, won impossible cases, defended billion-dollar clients, and still, she couldn't protect her own child from this man. She looked at Aidan asleep in the next room, clutching a worn dinosaur toy, and felt the sharp sting of failure. All the power in the world, and she couldn't keep her life from unraveling. Walter, meanwhile, was fighting a different war, quiet, internal, and cruel. Rachel had found a social worker who took an interest in his case, and within 2 weeks, she tracked down Emily. She was 21 now, a college senior studying psychology in Raleigh. She hadn't spoken her father's name in years. When asked if she wanted to reconnect, her voice was flat. "He left me, that's all I remember." The news gutted Walter. He said nothing when Rachel told him, just lowered his head and whispered, "I don't blame her." He had dreamed for years about that moment, about seeing her again, explaining everything, telling her the truth. But now that the door had cracked open, he was paralyzed by the weight of it. What if she never forgave him? What if she looked at him and saw only what her mother had said? A failure, a coward, a ghost. Rachel tried to reassure him. People change. Time changes things. But Walter wasn't sure if time had healed anything or just buried it deeper. He started missing their coffee meetings. she'd find him more withdrawn, less talkative. Once, when she offered to take him shopping for warmer clothes, he said quietly, "I've lived without them this long. What makes you think I deserve any better now?" And yet, amidst all of this unraveling, Rachel was changing too. Slowly, subtly, she began skipping late-night work calls, cancelled 2 out-of-town conferences. She started picking Aiden up from school herself. At first, he didn't know how to talk to her, offering short answers, glancing toward the nanny out of habit. But one afternoon, as they sat on the living room floor piecing together a puzzle, he looked up and said, "You're fun when you're not on your phone." The words sliced clean through her. That night, she lay awake in bed, thinking of her father, wondering if he'd ever asked himself what he'd missed. A week later, over coffee, she sat across from Walter, hands wrapped around a warm mug. The autumn light outside cast long shadows through the cafe window. "I never knew my father," she said quietly, eyes on the table. "He left when I was 9, didn't even say goodbye. I used to wait at the window, thinking maybe he'd knock on the door, say he made a mistake, but he never did." She looked up, her voice soft but steady. "Somehow my son has one now, because of you." Walter swallowed hard, the weight of her words too heavy to ignore. "I didn't do anything special," he murmured. "You saved him," Rachel said. "Not just that day in the street. You showed him what it means to care, without needing anything in return." He looked away, emotion catching in his throat. For so long, he had believed his story ended in silence and shadows, that no one would ever see the man he used to be. But Rachel saw him, not as a charity, not as a burden, but as a person, flawed, yes, but still capable of love, still worthy of it. Their worlds were colliding, hers of skyscrapers and boardrooms, his of sidewalks and second chances. The friction hurt. It exposed things they both tried to bury, but it also sparked something neither of them expected. Redemption, the beginning of healing. As they sat in that quiet cafe, no verdicts handed down, no press releases issued, just 2 people slowly piecing their lives back together. One truth became clear. Sometimes, the only way forward is through the wreckage, and sometimes, the person you're trying to save ends up saving you too. The day of the meeting arrived grey and overcast, the air thick with anticipation. Walter clutched the small gift tightly in his coat pocket, a Braille version of The Secret Garden, Emily's favourite book when she was little. He had spent nights memorising what he would say, rehearsing his words like a man stepping onto a stage he never thought he'd see again. Rachel had arranged everything, booked the quiet corner table at a modest cafe in Raleigh, and even offered to drive him. Walter declined. Some things, he said, a man needed to walk into on his own, even blind. When Emily entered, she carried years of distance in her posture, arms folded tight, jaw clenched, eyes scanning the room with suspicion. She was beautiful and sharp, every bit her father's child, and yet a stranger. She sat across from him, silent for a long moment. "I don't know why I came," she finally said. Walter's voice trembled. "Because deep down, maybe part of you still wonders if I ever loved you." She scoffed, the sound brittle. "You disappeared. You let her tell me you didn't care. You didn't fight. You just vanished." "I was losing my sight," he said quietly. "And everything else. Your mother didn't just win in court. She won in your heart. I didn't want to poison that." Emily's face tightened. "So you gave up?" "I didn't know how to fight anymore," Walter whispered. "I lost everything. My job, my home, my sight. But I never stopped loving you. Not for 1 second." He reached into his coat and placed the book on the table. "I had this made for you, in Braille, in case you ever wanted to know my world, even a little." Her eyes fell on the book, her expression unreadable. A storm was brewing behind her silence. "I'm not a child anymore," she said, her voice cold. "And I don't need a bedtime story. I needed a father." Then she stood. "I can't do this. I'm sorry." And just like that, she walked out, the bell above the cafe door jingling like a gavel. Walter sat motionless, the book untouched on the table, his hands shaking, his heart pounding in his ears. Within a day, another storm began, this one online. A local tabloid blog twisted the viral video of Walter saving Aiden into a conspiracy. A thread claimed he was a con artist who latched onto a rich lawyer's guilt. Someone dug up an old mugshot, Walter arrested years ago for loitering near a hotel, and posted it with the headline, "From Hero to Hustler." The truth about Walter Price. The narrative shifted fast. Trolls called Rachel naive, a bleeding heart fool blinded by sentiment. The firm moved quickly. Damage control. They suspended her pending internal review, her inbox filled with cold emails and veiled threats. She was quietly being pushed out. Then Walter vanished. The shelter he'd been staying at said he left 2 nights ago. No explanation. No goodbye. Just gone. Rachel called every contact she had, checked every street corner near the diner, the courthouse, the food bank. Nothing. For the first time in her life, Rachel felt truly, utterly lost. She had spent years climbing a mountain she now saw was hollow. She had argued mergers worth billions, won impossible legal battles, and none of it mattered. None of it saved the man who saved her son. She stood in front of the firm's glass doors the next morning, holding her resignation letter. No press, no statement, just a quiet, final decision. She walked away from everything. When a partner tried to stop her, she simply said, "I'm done serving power. I want to start serving people." It was raining by the time she found him. Same street, same crosswalk. Walter sat motionless on the curb, drenched, his sign sagging with the weight of water. He didn't move as cars passed, didn't flinch when thunder cracked, just sat there, hands on his cane, his coat soaked through. Rachel crossed the street and knelt in front of him, her knees in the puddles. "I've been looking for you," she said softly. "I didn't want to be found," he replied without turning his head. "I know," she said, "but I wasn't finished." He said nothing. The rain poured harder. She took off her coat and draped it over his shoulders. "They suspended me," she added, "said I was reckless, emotionally compromised." He gave a faint, humorless chuckle. "They're not wrong. I quit," she said, "because maybe being emotionally compromised is the first real thing I've done in a decade." A long silence passed between them. Then Walter asked, "Did she say anything? Emily?" Rachel hesitated. She was angry, hurt. "But she came, Walter. That means something." His face twisted, pained. "I broke her." Rachel reached out, resting a hand on his knee. "Maybe, but that doesn't mean she can't heal, and it doesn't mean you're done trying." Rain blurred the edges of the streetlights, cast everything in silver. For the first time in days, Walter lifted his head. "I don't know how to be anyone else anymore," he whispered. "You don't have to be," Rachel said. "You just have to be here." And in that quiet moment, beneath the storm, 2 broken people sat side by side, neither saved, neither whole, but still trying. And sometimes, trying is everything. The rain eventually stopped, and in the weeks that followed, so did the running, from shame, from fear, from the weight of the past. Rachel brought Walter into the small guest house behind her home, not as a charity case, but as an equal, a man who had earned his place through courage and truth. "This isn't pity," she told him, as she handed him the keys. "This is partnership." He tried to argue at first, pride still scratching at old wounds, but she stopped him with a look. "You saved my son. Let me help you rebuild." The first step wasn't legal, it was human. They sat at the kitchen table each morning with coffee, mapping out what the world ignored, how hard it was to get an ID without an address, how few services accounted for blindness, how quickly the system discarded people when no one was watching. Rachel used her reputation, her resources, and her rage to build something new, a pro bono legal clinic focused solely on the forgotten, the homeless, the displaced, the abandoned, and she made Walter her first advisor. He didn't want the title, but she insisted. "You know the streets better than I ever will," she said. "I've read the law. You've lived the failure of it." Word spread fast. People came, not just for legal help, but for hope. Walter sat beside them, his sightless eyes filled with something deeper than vision. He listened to their stories, asked questions no intake form ever could. He guided them not just with advice, but with empathy, the kind born from knowing what it's like to be invisible. He became a voice, not loud, but steady. And it mattered. Months passed. Seasons turned. One late afternoon in early spring, Rachel heard a knock at the clinic's front door. She was surprised to find Emily standing there, older now, but softer. She held the worn Braille book in one hand and Walter's letter in the other. "I read it," she said simply. "All of it. And I saw what you're doing here." Rachel's breath caught. She stepped aside. Inside, Walter was speaking to a young man about housing vouchers. His posture changed the moment Emily entered. Time slowed. "Hi, Dad," she said. her voice shaking. He turned toward her, his hands trembling. Em? She crossed the space between them slowly, as if afraid the moment might break. Then, wordlessly, she stepped into his arms. They held each other for a long time, both crying, the air thick with a decade of grief, forgiveness, and fragile joy. No explanations, no justifications, just love, reborn. Rachel stood back, watching the reunion through glass doors, her hand wrapped tightly in Aidan's. He looked up at her, confused but curious. Is that his daughter? Yes, Rachel whispered, eyes brimming. She found her way back. Aidan smiled. Like we did. She nodded. Exactly like we did. In that moment, standing between her past and her future, Rachel felt something unfamiliar but profound. Peace. Not the kind that comes from victory, but the kind earned through surrender. Surrendering pride, pain, and the illusion that strength means going alone. She had built her career on winning, but here, in this place filled with brokenness and healing, she finally understood what it meant to be whole. Not perfect, not powerful, just real. And for the first time in years, Rachel Adams wasn't running from anything. She was walking towards something that mattered. The late afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows of the clinic, casting warm golden light across the quiet room where Walter sat surrounded by a small group of children. His fingers moved gently across the raised pages of a braille book, his voice calm and steady as he read aloud, each word landing with the weight of someone who had learned to see without sight. The children listened, rapt, some leaning in, others curled up on beanbags, their eyes wide with wonder. Laughter rippled now and then, soft and innocent, something rare in a place where pain often walked in first. From her office window, Rachel stood watching, one hand resting on Aidan's shoulder. They stood in silence, hearts full. She looked down at her son, who stared through the glass with the kind of admiration that couldn't be taught, only earned. You know, she said softly, some heroes don't wear capes, some wear scars. Aidan turned to her thoughtful and said, he's not just your hero, Mommy. He's mine too. Rachel blinked back tears, nodding. In that moment, all the courtrooms, the headlines, the mistakes, none of it mattered. What mattered was here, in this room built from brokenness and rebuilt by love. Walter's voice continued to rise and fall in the distance, guiding the story forward. As the camera slowly pulled back, capturing the scene in warm stillness, his voice lingered in voiceover, quiet but full of truth. Sometimes the people the world forgets are the ones sent to remind us who we really are. Fade out.